Hey Ken, this is Greg. This is Tuesday, January the 11th, year 2022. I have a bonus for you today. I have two things that I'm going to upload for you. The first one is going to be this, but the second one was an in-class thing that I did, and I had students talk, and I hope you can hear them and understand. But it's to give you an idea of exactly what goes on when I'm conducting my class, especially for discussions. I tried to give you a picture of what my room looks like as well. I'm not sure how good a picture it is, but I think you'll be able to figure it out. If you look at the board, you can see what things I want to talk about here today. This is all from chapter 3, I'm sorry. Walter Cunningham, how Atticus, Jim, and Calpurnia treat him when Walter is at their house. Burris Yule, that's our introduction to the Yule family. And after that, then we meet Bob Yule as well, although he's not actually in this chapter, just Atticus talks about him. Calpurnia and things about her, and then Atticus has a quotation at the last thing I want to talk about. It's a famous quotation. I'm sure you probably heard it before as well, but I just want to talk about that. But let's start off talking about Walter Cunningham. In particular, how Atticus and Calpurnia treated Walter, and to an extent Jim as well. Now, it is it is obvious that the Cunninghams and the Finches are from two different classes of people in town. Of course, the Finches are the upper class, you know, they live in town, they actually have a little bit of money. The Cunninghams are farmers, they're the middle class. And as we found out from our reading, the Cunninghams have like $0, zero money. So we found out from the dealings with the teacher yesterday, she wanted to give young Walter a quarter to go to the diner to eat, and he didn't, he wouldn't accept it. And Scout tried to explain it to the teacher, said, look, they don't have any money, and he wouldn't be able to pay it back anyway. You know, what Scout say, he's probably never seen 3 quarters together in his entire life. But what I wanted the students to understand today was the way that Atticus and Calpurnia treated Walter. He was a guest in their home, and even though there's difference of classes between the two groups of people, Atticus especially treated Walter as an equal. He treated him with respect. He treated him as a guest in the home. He didn't make fun of him. Now, Scout did, of course. Jim got it all started by inviting Walter over for dinner. I had to explain to the students that dinner really means lunch. But with much deference, Atticus treated Walter and made him feel comfortable and made him feel right at home. Again, Scout was the only fly in the ointment in that case, as she pointed out, what Walter was doing. He's pouring syrup all over his meat and all over his vegetables, all over everything he had. Really embarrassed Walter Cunningham, made him feel, I'm sure at that point, rather inferior, which is not something that Atticus was doing. So Calpurnia called Scout into the kitchen where she read her the riot act and said, that is your guest. You do whatever he wants. You don't embarrass your guest while he's here, and if he wants to eat the tablecloth, you let him eat the tablecloth. But he's your guest, and you treat him like one. But Calpurnia went even farther than that and pointed out something I think should be obvious from the reading as well. Calpurnia said, they're not like you. They're not the same type of people. The Cunninghams are not the same type of people, and you actually may be better than them, socially speaking. But he's your guest. You don't treat him like he's an inferior while he's here. And so with that acknowledgement, and which I'm sure undoubtedly Atticus understood as well, the difference in classes between the Finches and the Cunninghams. And yet, Atticus, again, treated him, and Calpurnia echoed his thoughts to Scout. Atticus treated young Walter Cunningham with the utmost respect and as an honored guest in his home, making no distinction whatsoever about the difference in classes. Now, I pointed out to my kids today, this is an important concept for this book because that's who Atticus is. And that's the way he views life in general. He's willing to give the benefit of the doubt to anybody who wants it. Now, he talked about the Yules later, and he was very outspoken about them. However, that is an indication, the way he treated Walter Cunningham is the way he probably treated everybody he came in contact with. And it's a really point of this book, and it shows a distinction between Atticus Finch and almost the rest of the people in town. All right, Atticus is willing to he is willing to extend kindness and goodness to people who are not in his sphere, his social sphere, and it becomes important. Of course, you know this. It becomes important later in the book when he's defending Tom Robinson, because Atticus chose to defend him and to treat him as an equal. Think about all the other white people in town, or most of the other white people in town. They wouldn't treat everybody. Particularly the blacks. They wouldn't treat everybody as equals. So anyway, we talked about that in class today. Talked about how Atticus and Calpurnian especially treated Walter Cunningham. All right, then we move on to this fellow named Burrus Ewell. And I had the students, I think it's on my other video, I had one of my students come up here to the board, and they made a list for the Ewells. Things that stood out, characteristics, traits that stood out for them. Of course, Burrus, this was his 4th year in 1st grade. All of the Ewells spent one day, and one day only, in school each year, and then they were marked absent the rest of the school year. He was a filthy creature. He was ornery. He was disrespectful. He had the proverbial chip on his shoulder. He hated everybody, basically. He and the rest of the Ewells hate everybody else, basically, but especially people who were in the higher classes than they were, and everybody was in a higher class than the Ewells. And he was, the things that he said to the teacher, he called her, called her a slut teacher, a slut of a teacher, which of course my students got a thrill out of that one. But anyway, he was just, again, he's very disrespectful. He had lice crawling out of his hair. He was just ornery. He was mean, nasty, ornery, and he's kind of the poster child, at this point of the story anyway, for anybody named Ewell. Okay? They're just hard people. They're disliked by everyone, and they dislike everyone else in the world. They think the world's out to get them. They blame everybody else. They do nothing for themselves. They are consumers in life. They don't produce anything. All they do is take. And I'll talk a little bit more when I get to Bob Ewell. In fact, I'll get to him now. Actually, he's the next on the list anyway. Bob Ewell is just, he has surrendered all parental rights and responsibilities to his kids. He doesn't provide for them. He gets the relief check. Before there was welfare, they had relief from the state. He took his relief check all the time, and he got drunk with it. He bought whiskey and got drunk, leaving his children basically on their own and to fend for themselves, and probably half the time or more were hungry. Atticus pointed out to Scott, said, look, we've got laws around here, but the Ewells, we don't apply the law to the Ewells. We bend the law a little bit, because no one in Macomb is going to begrudge any of the Ewell children the ability to eat. They allowed, the people in town, they allowed Bob Ewell hunting out of season, which is a no-no in most societies. And they allowed him that, Atticus said, I guess whatever he can catch, whatever he can shoot, it will ensure that his kids get something to eat. Atticus made the statement to Scout, said, look, the Ewells have been this way for 3 generations. I'm not sure of the exact word. I don't think he used scum, but they've been the eyesore. They've been, they've just been awful for the people around here. They've been an embarrassment to Macomb for 3 generations. And each generation, they reject education, the ability to even read, write, and do simple mathematics, which obviously is going to limit them on the types of jobs they can get, and the jobs that they can get probably have very little monetary value. And of course, back then, I mean, there was no way Bob Ewell was going to get hired necessarily at that time anyway, because the jobs were so few. But anyway, that's Atticus's commentary on Bob Ewell. Just not a nice man at all. No one, no one likes him. He's on the low rung of classes in Macomb County and Macomb Town, and will do absolutely nothing. I mean, he obviously has no pride in himself, has no pride in his family. He just lets them go. I had to tell the students today, Atticus made this comment to Scout, said, one day when I take the Christmas tree out, after Christmas, I'll show you where they live. And you already know this, but the Ewells lived adjacent to the town dump. And you've read it before, you know that they got a lot of the things around their house from the town dump as well. I mean, they were just poor, they were mean, they were ornery, they're just an awful group of people. All right, Calpurnia. Calpurnia is such an interesting character in this book. As I mentioned yesterday, she has a different social class, at least on appearances. When we get to the church scene where she takes Jim and Scout to church, you'll find out that there's not a great distinction there. But I'm sure it's good for Calpurnia. She is as demonstrated in this chapter, she is the mother of particularly Scout, but Scout and Jim both. And when Scout left the kitchen, Calpurnia gave her a whack on the rear end, gave her a little spanking as she went there. And she's talking to Scout about how she's treating Walter Cunningham. She's kind of the moral compass in the absence of Atticus for the Finch kids as well. She's intelligent. One of the comments that was made in there, I think Atticus made it, might have been the chapter before, Calpurnia is one of the few black people who know how to read. And we also, that's the bell, it's out of school. We also know that Calpurnia could speak well, all right? Unlike most of the other blacks who were there who were not given the opportunity to get an education, Calpurnia, she's very fortunate in what she has. I asked the students how they think she got that way with the ability to read and to write and to speak well. And of course, if you remember from the book, she grew up at Finch's Landing, and there she was presented the opportunity to read and write. I didn't tell the students that. I'll save that for in the reading. But one of my students said, I think it's on the other video, that maybe Atticus, after he hired her, he took her in and he taught her to read and write. And of course, that'd be so difficult to do, at her age. And Calpurnia is really a lot older than, I think she's older than Atticus, if I recall right, from later in the book, or she's about the same age. But anyway, people, basically, educators tell us that if you don't learn to read by the third grade, it's nearly impossible for you to learn. It's possible, but it's really, really hard. All right, the last thing, from the very end of this chapter, one of the famous quotes from the book, Atticus is talking to Scout, and he said, he was talking to her about getting along with people, understanding people, having empathy for people, and not just getting along with them, but really have a genuine care and concern about people. He said, first of all, if you learn a simple trick, Scout, you'll get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. And this is the quote. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. I told my students today, this is that statement is really in some fashion, in some form. That's one of the main points of the book, and it's what Atticus demonstrates over and over and over. He has that ability to look at other people and to understand their lives and to understand what maybe the problems or the issues that they are having or have had and what makes them tick. And again, that quote, one of my favorite quotes, on our old building, I had all my walls painted with paintings from, from all the stories we read, and the woman who painted To Kill a Mockingbird on there, she also included this quotation on it. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. And that's the lesson that Atticus is trying to teach to his children so they can become successful in life as they grow older. And that's one of the main points that I want to emphasize with my students during the continued reading of this book as well. Well, that's it for me for today. Again, there's another one out there. This one is 04. There's another one out there that I'll put out there as well. And it was my classroom today. If you want to take time to look at it, you may. Of course, you're not obligated to look at any of them. But I meant to ask you, and you can just reply to me, in Facebook. I'm just curious as to how you're doing. Are you still on the road to recovery, and are you making progress and stuff like that? Still praying for you. Still love you. Still care about you. See you later.